Brother made my life hell, then got my wife pregnant. Now this story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. I never imagined that the person who made my childhood a living hell would one day destroy my adult life in the worst possible way. I thought I had escaped him, moved on, built a new life. I was wrong. 3 months ago, my wife Karen sat me down at our dining table, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays with our son. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Guilt, fear, maybe both. I had seen that look before, years ago when she had confessed her first affair. But this time, there was something darker behind it. I need to tell you something, she said. My heart started pounding. I didn't know why, but I knew it was bad. What is it? I asked, my voice already unsteady. She hesitated, looking down at her hands as she twisted her wedding ring. Our son, he might not be yours. For a few seconds, I didn't understand. The words sat in the air, heavy and suffocating. What do you mean? I finally managed to say. I had an affair. For a long time. I couldn't breathe. The walls of our home, the life we had built together, felt like they were caving in around me. But nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. It's David. I stared at her, unblinking. David who? But I already knew. Your brother. I shot up from my chair so fast that it scraped against the floor, the sound piercing through the heavy silence. You're lying, I whispered, my voice barely audible. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she said. It started years ago, when I stayed at your parents' house during the holidays. We were just talking at first. He was going through a breakup. He said he felt alone. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. Stop, I snapped, stepping back like she was contagious. I need you to understand. Understand what? I yelled. That you slept with my brother? That you got pregnant and made me raise his kid? Karen sobbed, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. My mind was racing, piecing together memories, moments that suddenly made sense. Was it just once? I demanded. Her silence was the answer. How long? My voice shook. It never really stopped, she whispered. We always stayed in touch. Sometimes we met in hotels. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make her hurt as much as I was hurting. Why the hell did you marry me? I asked, my voice cracking. Because I loved you, she said weakly, and I knew you'd be a good father. I let out a bitter laugh. So you knew? You knew all along that he might not be mine? She nodded, crying harder. I turned away, grabbing my car keys from the counter. Where are you going? She asked, panic in her voice. Away from you, I said. Forever. She ran after me, grabbing my arm. Please don't go, she begged. Please, we can fix this. I yanked my arm away. You don't get to ask me for anything, I said coldly. You made your choice. Now live with it. I walked out and never looked back. The first place I went was my parents' house. My father opened the door, surprised to see me so late. What's wrong? He asked. I stepped inside, feeling like I was suffocating. I need to talk to both of you. My mother was sitting in the living room knitting. She looked up at me and frowned. What's going on? She asked. I took a deep breath. It's about David. The room fell silent. My father's expression hardened. What did he do now? I sat down, my hands shaking. He's been sleeping with Karen, I said. For years. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. And Henry, I continued, my voice hollow, isn't mine. He's David's. My father swore under his breath. Are you sure? He asked. She admitted it. My mother shook her head violently. No, my David would never do that. You must have misunderstood. Misunderstood? I laughed bitterly. You still think he's an angel? Mom, he's been screwing my wife behind my back. And you know what? He knew what he was doing. He didn't care. She was shaking her head over and over, refusing to believe it. But my father, he was silent. And then after a long moment, he stood up and walked to the phone. What are you doing? My mother asked. Calling him, he said simply. I stopped him. Let me, I said. He handed me the phone. David picked up on the third ring. Hey, what's up? I know. Silence. Know what? He said after a moment. About you and Karen. About Henry. More silence, then a chuckle. Wow, he said. So she finally told you, huh? His voice was so casual, so completely devoid of remorse that my stomach twisted. You ruined my life, I said, my voice low, trembling with rage. Oh, come on, he said. Don't be so dramatic. It's not like I forced her. You're disgusting, I spat. He sighed. Look, man, it happened, okay? But let's be real. She always liked me more. My hand tightened around the phone. I'm going to tell Mom and Dad everything, I said. He laughed. Like they'd believe you. I'm the golden child, remember? I put him on speaker. They're listening right now, I said. Suddenly, he wasn't laughing anymore. What? My father took the phone from me. David, he said, his voice ice cold. You are no longer my son. Dad, come on, David stammered. Don't be like that. You think I raised you for this? My father snapped. You think you can sleep with your brother's wife and still call yourself my son? Dad, you're cut off, my father said. No more money, no more college fund. You're on your own. My mother started crying, but she didn't argue. For the first time in my life, I saw David lose. He begged, he pleaded, but my father had made up his mind. That night, I left my parents' house feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't just walking away from Karen, I was walking away from everything David had ever taken from me. 2 weeks later, my father changed his will. David would get nothing. The $2 million, the house, everything would be mine. And when David found out, he called me, desperate. Please, he sobbed, help me. I laughed. Help you? I said. Like you helped me? I'm your brother, he whispered. No, I said. You lost that right a long time ago. And I hung up. As I walked away from Karen, I felt no urge to look back. The weight I had carried for months, the anger, the betrayal, the grief, was finally gone. She was nothing to me now, just a chapter in my past, one that I had no intention of rereading. The days that followed felt lighter. I focused on myself, my work, my own happiness. I reconnected with old friends, started taking weekend trips to places I had always wanted to visit, but never had the freedom to. For the first time in years, I was truly living for myself. Then one evening, just as I was leaving my office, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Hello? There was silence at first, then a shaky breath. It's me, a voice said. I froze. David. For a moment, I considered hanging up, but curiosity got the better of me. Why are you calling me? I asked, my voice void of emotion. I need help, he said. I scoffed. Help from me? Please, just hear me out, he said quickly, as if afraid I'd cut him off. Things have been bad, really bad. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. Karen left, he admitted. She took Henry and moved back with her parents. She said she couldn't do it anymore. A bitter laugh escaped me. Guess she finally realized what kind of person you are. I don't have anyone, he continued, ignoring my jab. Mom won't answer my calls. Dad, I don't even try. I lost everything, man. My education, my future. I need a chance to start over. I clenched my jaw. You want me to feel bad for you? No, he whispered. I want you to forgive me. For a second, I actually laughed. Forgive you, I repeated. David, you didn't just betray me. You took my wife, my son, my family, and you didn't even have the decency to feel bad about it. Not once did you try to apologize until now, when you have no one left. I know, he said, his voice thick with desperation. I was a terrible brother. I was a terrible person. But I swear I've changed. I don't expect you to forget everything, but please just don't leave me alone. I took a deep breath, looking up at the darkening sky. For years I had longed to hear these words from him. I had wanted nothing more than for him to realize what he had done and to suffer the consequences. But now, I felt nothing. You made your bed, I said finally. Now lie in it. Please, he whispered. Goodbye, David. And I ended the call. I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone, waiting to feel guilt, waiting to feel something. But all I felt was peace. I walked home that night with a sense of closure I had never thought possible. The past no longer had power over me. The betrayals, the pain, they were all behind me now. David was no longer my problem, and for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Weeks passed after David's call, and he never reached out again. I had expected more attempts, more desperate messages, but there was nothing. It was as if he had finally accepted the truth, that I was done with him. I spent those weeks focusing on myself. My career was thriving, and for once, I had time to just be. No obligations, no burdens, no lies weighing me down. I took up boxing again, something I had abandoned after getting married. It felt good to punch a bag instead of holding back my anger. Then one Saturday afternoon, my father called me. "Come over," he said. "Is something wrong?" I asked. He sighed. "Your mother wants to talk." I ran a hand down my face. I already knew what this was about. "Dad," I started, but he cut me off. "Just come, listen to what she has to say." Reluctantly, I agreed. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mother was waiting in the living room. She looked older, more tired than I had ever seen her. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. I sat down across from her. "Let me guess. This is about David." She winced but nodded. "He called me again," she admitted. "He's struggling. He's in a bad place." I let out a slow breath. "Mom, just listen," she pleaded. "I didn't want to." I had moved on. I had won. But I owed her this much. "Go ahead," I muttered. She swallowed hard. "He lost his job last week. He got into a fight with his boss, and they fired him on the spot. He's behind on rent, and with Karen gone, he has no support. I went to see him." My eyebrows shot up. "You? What? I had to," she said quickly. "I know your father would be furious if he found out, but he's still my son." I clenched my jaw. "Did he even apologize to you, or did he just ask for money?" She hesitated. I scoffed. "That's what I thought." "He's ashamed," she insisted. "He knows he's ruined his life, and he regrets what he did to you." I saw it in his eyes. I leaned forward. "Mom, do you know how many times I wanted to hear those words from you when I was a kid? How many times I wished you'd stand up for me instead of him? But you never did. You always made excuses for him. Always." She wiped at her eyes. "I know. And I was wrong. But I don't want to lose on both Conchud. My sons." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "What do you want me to do?" I asked finally. "Just talk to him," she said. "Not for him, for, you need closure." Closure. I already had closure. But I could see the desperation in her face, the way she needed me to do this. So against my better judgment, I agreed. 2 days later, I met David at a small diner near my apartment. He looked terrible. His face was unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who had hit rock bottom. "Hey," he muttered as he sat down. I didn't say anything, just stared at him. He shifted uncomfortably. "Thanks for meeting me." I crossed my arms. "What do you want, David?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "Straight to the point, huh?" I said nothing. He exhaled, running a hand through his greasy hair. "Look, I screwed up. I know that. And I know there's nothing I can say that'll fix it. But I need help." "Man," I leaned back. "Help?" He nodded. "I lost everything. My education, my job, my relationship with Mom and Dad. Karen won't even let me see Henry." I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" He swallowed hard. "She says I remind her of the worst mistakes she ever made." For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost, but then I remembered everything. I tilted my head. "So, let me get this straight. You betrayed me, slept with my wife, raised my son as your own, and now you want me to help you?" He looked down, shame written all over his face. "I don't deserve it," he admitted, "but I don't know what else to do." I tapped my fingers against the table. "You don't deserve my forgiveness, David, and you definitely don't deserve my help." He flinched but nodded. I sighed. "But I will give you one thing." His eyes lit up with hope. "Closure," I said. "This is the last time we will ever speak. You are not my brother. You are not my family. I don't hate you, but I don't care about you either. From this moment on, you don't exist to me." His face crumbled. "Please." I stood up, throwing some cash on the table for my coffee. "Goodbye, David." I walked out without looking back. The next morning, my mother called me, asking how it went. I told her the truth. "He's on his own now," I said. She sniffled but didn't argue. And that was the end of it. David disappeared from my life after that. I heard through distant relatives that he moved out of state, tried to start over somewhere new. But I didn't care. I was done. and I had never felt lighter. Weeks passed after my final conversation with David. Life moved forward, and with each day, the weight of the past lessened. I focused on myself, my job, my newfound independence. I went to the gym regularly, spent time with people who actually valued me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to fight for respect. It came naturally when I surrounded myself with the right people. But the past has a way of creeping back when you least expect it. One evening, after a long day at work, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would ignore it, but something told me to pick up. "Hello," a hesitant voice answered. "It's Karen." My grip tightened around the phone. I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my tone flat. I just wanted to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "Not to ask for anything, just to tell you something." I stayed silent. "David left," she admitted. "He packed up and disappeared. He didn't even say goodbye to Henry." I exhaled slowly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I wanted you to know you were right," she whispered, "about everything." I leaned against the counter, staring at the city lights outside my window. "You expect me to care?" She let out a bitter laugh. "No, I don't. But for what it's worth, I regret everything. I destroyed the best thing I ever had. And now I'm alone, raising a son who keeps asking where his father is. And I have no answer." Her voice cracked. I closed my eyes. "Karen, I spent years thinking I wasn't enough. That maybe if I had been different, if I had done more, you wouldn't have betrayed me. But the truth is, it was never about me. It was about Yuak, about your choices, and now you have to live with them." Silence stretched between us. "I know," she said finally. I wanted to say I'm sorry." I didn't respond. "Goodbye," she whispered. I ended the call and let out a slow breath. There was no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just finality. A week later, I got a text from my cousin, a blurry photo attached. It was David looking gaunt and unkempt, standing outside a bus station. "Heard he's been couch surfing, barely getting by." Guess karma finally caught up. I stared at the image for a moment, then deleted the message. I didn't need to see it. David was no longer a part of my life. People like him always believe they can get away with anything, that they can manipulate, lie, cheat, and still come out on top. But life doesn't work that way. Sooner or later, the weight of their own choices crushes them. As for me, I was finally free. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about knowing your worth, about learning when to walk away from people who don't deserve your loyalty. Some wounds don't heal, but they do stop bleeding. So now I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have given David another chance? Would you have forgiven Karen? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with betrayal like this, share your story. Let's talk about it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless.